Good evening, everyone. Here we present you with another one of my games that I played recently, about 6 months ago. As you can see, my opponent was under no pressure whatsoever. Now let's take a look at this game and see how things went along. I opened this game with c4, which I usually don't play. He opened with knight to f6. And I followed with g3, intending to, of course, have my bishop take over that diagonal. He replied c6, opening up some room for his queen there. I replied bishop to g2, taking control of that diagonal. And he replied d5, attacking my pawn. I replied pawn takes pawn. And he replied pawn takes pawn. And I replied knight to c3. And he replied knight to c6. And I replied d3, opening up my bishop's diagonal on my queen side. He replied d4, advancing and threatening my knight. My knight moved over to e4, threatening his knight. Instead of taking my knight, he went bishop to e6. Bishop to e6. Okay, and I followed right away with knight takes knight, forcing him to make the decision of which pawn to use. He decided to use his e-pawn, and he doubled up his pawns and took my knight. And I didn't mind that at all because he's got double pawns now. So I played queen to a4, pinning his knight. He replied bishop to b4. Bishop to b4. Check. Bishop to b4. And I replied bishop to d2. And he decided to exchange bishops, checking my king. And I, of course, had to take his bishop, or else we would put material down. So he replied then queen to d6. And I replied bishop x c6. I decided to go ahead and take his knight, and he decided to go b takes my bishop, and I right away played knight to f3, attacking his pawn, which was defended by his queen. He replied rook to b8, and I replied b3. And he replied rook to d8. Again, he moves his rook, this time over to d8. And I replied rook on a to c1, attacking his pawn twice. He decided to castle. Instead of defending that pawn, he decided to castle. I decided to play rook takes that c pawn, and I took his pawn. And he decided to go queen to d5. I decided to follow that up with rook on h to c1. He followed that with bishop to d7, attacking my rook. Okay, I looked this over and I thought, well, what the heck? Knight x d4. So I took his pawn, defended my knight with my queen there, defending my rook. He decided to go after the rook, takes the rook with his bishop, and I follow through with knight takes bishop. Now he goes rook to d7. Rook to d7. Moving his rook out of danger, and I follow with king to d1. He followed up with queen to h1 check. He came all the way down, checked my king. My king moved to c2, attacking his queen with my rook. His queen x h2, grabbing a pawn back, evening things up there. Let's see, there's 3 black pawns down to, no, almost. He's still a pawn down. Okay, I went queen to f4. Queen to f4. Defending my bishop's pawn. He went rook to c8. Pinning my knight. I moved king to b2. Defending my knight. He moved rook on d to c7. Double attacking my knight. I moved knight to e7 check. Attacking his rook. Okay, now he got himself in a little jam here. His king is in check. I'm threatening his rook. If his rook takes my rook, I take his rook, call check, and then it ends up being mate. See, his rook takes my knight, my rook takes his rook, calls check. He has to move his rook down. I go take his rook again, and it's checkmate. So he got himself in a jam there. He goes king to h8. And I decide to take his rook. And he goes rook xc1. He takes my rook down here. Okay. And I go king takes rook. So all is well. He still has 5 pawns. I have 6 pawns. Queens are even, and I have a knight. So he's a knight and a pawn down now. And he goes queen to h5. I follow through with knight to a7 and take his pawn. Yet another pawn. He goes queen to c5, check. Threatening my knight, checking my king at the same time. I go queen to c4, offering him the exchange. He goes queen to a3, check. And I go king to b1. He goes queen to f8. He realized that if he takes my knight, my queen will checkmate him by going down here. So he cannot take my knight. So he has to defend against the checkmate. So he goes queen to f8. All the way down. I decide to force him to exchange queens. I go queen to c8. He goes king to g8. And then I decide to go ahead and exchange queens. So I take his queen, call check, and he responds and takes my queen. Now at this point, he is left with 4 pawns and a king. And I have 6 pawns, a knight, and my king. Unfortunately for him, he's in bad shape. I move king to c2, moving my king up to get my king in action. He moves king to e8. I follow with king to c3. He follows king to d7. I follow with king to c4. Coming into the battle, he goes h5, moves his pawn to h5. I follow up with knight to b5. Get my knight back into play here. He goes G5. I follow through with A4. Bring my A pawn up. Start putting some pressure on that side of the board. He goes H4. I decide to go ahead and take that pawn, and he takes my pawn. So, in this situation, he's 3 moves from getting the queen. I'm 4 moves from getting the queen. Okay, I go knight to d4 with the intent of going down to f3 and then knocking his pawn out if he should happen to go down there. He goes h3. He's moving to get there. I go knight to f3, and now his pawn is worthless. He goes king to d6. Advances. I go a5, putting the pressure on him. He goes king to c6. I go b4, protecting the pawn. He goes king to b7. I go d4, advancing another pawn. He goes king to b7. Oh, king to a6. And I go d5, putting more pressure on him. He goes f5, which does nothing. I go d6. The pressure is on, and the game is about to end. He goes f5, which again is nothing. I go d6, d5 to d6. I go d7. He goes h2. I go knight takes pawn, preventing him from getting any queens, and he resigns at this point. As you can see in this game, he literally fell behind in material. The game was simple, and it was a matter of exchanging material once I had a winning position. Winning material advantage. As you can see, my pawns are much more in place than his. His double pawn really messed him up. And we can go all the way back to the beginning when I exchanged knights and he had to double his pawns. That is a turning point. Even though it didn't look like much, by the time he got to the end of the game, it was a major setback. Because if he could have had a pawn over here, he may have been able, or over here, he may have been able to do some damage. But his double pawn ended up hurting him, and poor play cost him the game. So there you go, folks. Another game from the Chess Confessor. We'll see you again soon. Take care now.